Good morning, everybody here in the rooms and in digital presence. We are now starting the session 6.1, Perception and Culture. And we start with our first speaker, Carlos Hernán Guzman Umaña. I will read a few words about his semiotics life, but that is from Tartu University, and his first thesis was about the tricker's mind. Guzman analyzed the ability for creative deception from the perspective of cognitive as agentive semiotics, board games as a diagrammatic modelling system, and is a topic of his MA thesis at the University of Tartu, where he explores the possibility that this kind of games provides as a cultural form of expression and as generators of social transformation. Welcome, Carlos.
Thank you.
The floor is yours.
Okay, let's start. So hello, my presentation has been established. It's about this concept that I have developed in my previous master thesis, Trickster's Mind, and is in this case is related specifically to how the interference. Of the senses works as a strategy for non-verbal deception. Well, before I start and enter in matter, I will talk a little about the concept of the trickster. That is the basis of my work. Or this character is an archetype, but also a representation in my theory or my proposal as a representation of the skills, cognitive skills that all humans have for not only deception, but also for creative ingenuity and other kind of behavior. My question, what I want to start is what is common for these three elements that I'm presenting. On the left side, we have the mimic octopus. That is a very versatile creature that can assume and act as different animals. It kinds of disguises as other animals in order to lure them or to make them go away. The second element is this pickpocket experts that use some kind of deception to get their objectives, and also in a more broad way, like, for example, how in military situations deception can be used. So what is the common element on this? And to answer this question, we have to go first to some theoretical framework laid out by Douglas Niño from the Jorge Tadeo University in Colombia. He proposed the concept of agentive semiotics to explain a little how this, how meaning making occurs from a point of agents. So basically what we have here is three basic conditions of agency. One is the animation. It means that the agent has to be a live organism able to move in different ways. When we think about movement, usually we think about animals, but also, for example, plants or trees can move themselves to position looking for a better source of water or light. So maybe it's not as fast as we think, but they have some kind of animation. And this comprises some sub-characteristics like embodiment, kinetic perception, affectivity, intersubjectivity. I will not go deep into this, but just give the broad vision. The second is situation, because animation never happens on an empty space. There is always a movement inside some kind of context, and the agent or the individual has to situate himself or itself in this environment in order to act in a meaningful way. And the third condition is attention. That is, there is an attentional structure and attentional dynamics. That is the point where I want to focus on this presentation. But still, I'm going to talk a little about the basics of these conditions. So I'm putting the example of a dance that is some kind of activity that we are accustomed, or some people is accustomed to do. And in order to make or to do this kind of activity, there are some conditions that you need. One of the elements is the concept of embodiment, like we are, or perceptions and our cognition is related to a body, and in the way that we, our body is configured, defines or influences the way we think and the way we act. And the other element that is key as the intersubjectivity, as expressed by Husserl, the ability to interchange thoughts and feelings, both conscious and unconscious, between two persons or subjects, as facilitated by empathy. So in the case of dancing, you have to establish an intersubjectivity with the other person, like understand that this other organism that is present is also someone similar to you, with some wishes and desires and things like that. And by this, you can apply some joint attention, and in that way, generate a joint agenda, like doing a dance or dancing. The second element is situation. So in order to dance, you have to be aware of a lot of things, like what is the space where you are. Maybe you are listening to some music that will give you the compass or the rhythm that you are going to dance with. And for this, you will get some kind of engagement. You will adjust yourself with the environment and start perceiving. So for example, if someone doesn't have a good sense of rhythm, probably he will not be able to follow the music in order to perform the dance in the right way. The second, we go away with, again with the embeddedness. So you have to have some kind of a spatio-temporal sense of where you are and how the time is flowing. Some working memory of, for example, in dance, you learn some steps that you have to follow, and what we call an intersubjective flux. This occurs, for example, when two dancers have some experience or some previous practice dancing. They will start creating some kind of a intersubjectivity communication. They know, sometimes even just by one look or by one single movement, to communicate to the other what they want to do, if we are going to do a turn or something like that. So it creates some kind of intersubjective flux. And there is the concept of enactive cognition, where the mental functions arises from the dynamic interaction of the organism with this environment. So these are elements that are required for all this kind. And these elements can work on an individual level, from level of an organism as basic as a bacteria or something like that. It has to have some kind of a understanding and adjustment to its environment, but also it could occur in a social or cultural levels. Like if you are part of a society, you have to understand, for example, what is your position inside a organizational structure of an enterprise or in the organizational structure of a university, what is your status if you're a student, if you're a teacher, and that will give you some kind of context of, and also you get like some kind of language of how do you have to behave in this kind of spaces. And the element that I want to focus on, the attention, there is an attentional structure that is based on the idea proposed by Aaron Kurzweil, where there is a thematic focus. When we are doing any kind of activity, there is some element that is extremely relevant for what we're doing. So for example, in dancing, the thematic focus will be mostly on the music, on the partner, and on the dance, the movements that we are creating. There is a thematic field that is surrounding elements that will be part of this action. In the case of dancing, the dance floor, other couples, and people looking around, things like that will be the thematic field that is important to keep in mind, but it's not the main element. And there are some marginal elements outside that in some contexts is not relevant, and we don't put our attention in there. And this attentional structure leads to some attentional dynamics. So the dynamics might be like, for example, change of focus. If think about a Bond movie where Bond is dancing with the girl of the movie, and suddenly the enemy enters and he perceives that there is some danger. So he's changing his focus from the dance to perceive a threat or something like that. The other thing is that the field, the thematic field, can expand or contract depending on the situation. So if I, in a dance context, maybe my thematic field will go also to the judges and see how they are looking at me, if I'm doing right or wrong, and try to get some kind of information there. And it can occur, of course, the replacement of focus from the margin. So something that at some point is outside my field of view will become part of my center of focus. And well, going back to the basics. So for an agent to be able to be immersed in this context, he needs to perceive, and here's where the sensorial and perceptual elements come in play. The problem is that we cannot trust our senses entirely. There are all kinds of perceptual illusions, auditory, visual, things like that. So we have examples like the pareidolia. This is the famous face of Mars that, watching from some perspective, give this illusion that we perceive as a face, and people started thinking that maybe there was some kind of alien civilization on Mars or something like that. And we can think that this is some kind of error of processing, but actually is an evolutionary advantage. It's better if you are in the jungle and you watch or hear something to have a error and perceive it as a threat than just ignore it and be eaten by a tiger or something like that. So these are mechanisms that have been evolving with us in order to help us survive and process some situations. But this process has been used by some organisms to generate this kind of deception mechanisms. So for example, this caterpillar has the shape of a snake that for other species will confuse that, and they will try to stay away from them. So this is a mechanism of avoiding predators. But the question is this deception? So I will go with a broad definition of deception that says that an organism registers something Y, in this case, the face of the snake, and he believes that this represents, in this case, for example, a snake, when it's not the case. It's not a snake, it's a caterpillar. So but there is no deceiver. The organism doesn't have the ability to actually change or implement this kind of things. So I go with a more broad or more complete definition of deceptive behavior that says that an agent behavior is deceptive only if and only if the agent intends that because of its behavior, another organism will come and perhaps act on a false belief. So here I come again to the example of the octopus that not only changes colors or things like that, but it starts behaving as other animals. And it can adapt its behavior depending on the kind of stimulus that is present. But still, maybe it's not necessarily something intentional. So there are 4 levels of deception. I will go quick with this, but basically, in the case of the caterpillar, we have mimicry that is programmed, genetically programmed, and it cannot change its shape or its form. There are other, a second level, that is the programmed response, that in some cases animals, for example, spiders, assume amenacing posture to bring other animals away, even if they know. To know is so hard a word, but they act as they are more dangerous than they are really. But this is a programmed response, and it's also something that they cannot change. And there becomes something more close to the example of the octopus, that is the opening programming, and is feign or simulate some kind of behavior, and the possibility to change that behavior depending on the circumstances. So here there is a small element of intention that could be debated. And the final level is the reprogramming, or the 4th level of deception. The planning is when we or an agent start thinking about what other agents thinks or believes or wants, and acts in a way that lures this agent to behave. And it will come to some complicated levels, as pretending to pretend, like making another agent think that I'm trying to simulate something that I'm not simulating when I am really simulating that. This becomes like a very confused thing. So, and usually here is where we find this usual element of deception, that is lies, the verbal deception, where we start creating affirmations that are not true in order to make other people or other person believe that it's true and behave in that thing. So how does this function? In animation, for example, an animal or organism can immobilize other organism. And even the level of situation, you can disorient, conceal, simulate, or lie. And in the level of attention, you can distract. And I'm going to focus on the attention for the last part. So basically, the problem is that we have an attentional bottleneck. So in the case of when we are driving and listening or talking with the phone, we have to divide our capacity of process perceptual information, and this will make us change our focus from what we are seeing on the road to what we are listening in the phone. And okay, of course, this becomes dangerous. But this is what, for example, in the case of the pickpocketer, will use in order to achieve this. So in a crowded situation, like in a bus or something like that, he can use other stimuli. Even you can have a very attractive person talking to you and focusing your attention while other person is trying to steal things from you. So I'm going to skip this one because it's a little complex, but basically what we have is a fast and frugal decision making, where in situations when we have little time and a lot of information to process, what we do is trying to go for the most certain recognizable alternative, as in the case of the face of the snake in the caterpillar. So I will recognize it as something dangerous, and I will act as that. And this is what tricksters will use in their advantage. So they know that there are some responses that people already have to certain situations. And for example, we can have these army things where they created fake tanks that were actually kind of balloons in order to lure the attention of another army, in this case, in the Second World War, make the Nazis think that there was a big concentration of tanks or armies in some place, and it wasn't the case. So from a cognitive agentive approach, the idea is there are some kind of non-verbal ways to deceive. For example, in animation, the idea is to reduce the target's mobility, what we call guerrilla tactics. This is not per se a deception, but we can use situation to make an enemy or another agent to go into a trap where his mobility will be reduced. The other is interfere with the engagement of the agent and the context to subvert embedded situations, things that we are already used to do. So someone can enter and use that in order to make us do something inadvertently. And the attention is, for example, change to force a change of focus from one point to another. So that's basically the idea. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Carlos for your wonderful presentation. I was thinking about the characteristic of a proteiform, this proteiformity part of the octopus that can take potentially other form, other color, and this possibility that change from the virtualization to actualization actually. So thank you very much. We have time for one question here, please. And in the chat, you can read
So, where is it? Here? Yeah. Okay, so Carlos,
yep.
There is a problem of other minds in cognitive semiotics and in cognitive psychology, that we cannot make ontological claims about the mind of other minds because we cannot perceive them. So can you tell us something about how this research topic that you're using can be used to shed some light on the problem of other minds that is very anthropocentric, that prevents us from claiming consciousness in other animals?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm not a bio semiologist per se, it's not my strong point, but one of the things that I believe, and that's something that I have been working on, is that this capacity for understanding other minds is not only available on a human level. There are other creatures. Even in the case of the octopus, there has been some research showing that, for example, you can put an octopus to solve some kind of problem, like opening a lid of a jar that contains some kind of food inside. And if you put another octopus near to it, for the first octopus, it will take some time to figure out how to solve this thing. The other octopus, if you put another in a separate space, but he's able to, or it is able to look at the other octopus, it will understand how the other solve the problem. And when it's faced with the same problem, it will do the same thing. So in some way, this other octopus can somehow put itself in the body of the other octopus and understand what's happening there, and then figure itself as an element. What I am proposing, and it's something that will require some research, not only in animals, but also in humans, is how can I make, how we construct an idea of another people's mind and understand what they are looking, what they are designing, and even how they look at us. If they are looking at us as a threat, or if they're looking at us as something as not dangerous agent. So my idea is to work with games because, well, one of the problems when a student deception is that how do you can create an experiment where people is not cheating, but deceiving others and not make them aware that the experiment is about deception, because once the target understands that there will be some deception, everything is broken. So games have the particularity that deception is expected to happen as part of the game. So you can put people to play and introduce some elements that will generate deception and analyze that without interfering directly with the experiment. So that's what I would like to do in the future.
Good plan. Thank you very much to Carlos. We can follow with the next presentation, also because there is a little bit change in the program we are for today. So we can leave the stage to Kseniya Shtalenkova. Welcome, Kseniya. She holds a magister in sociology, and now she is a PhD candidate in philosophy and assistant lecturer in the European Humanities University in Vilnius.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for the introduction. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Let me share my screen with the presentation. Today I'm going to present, just a moment, I'm sorry about this. I'm going to present a paper which is based on my PhD dissertation, and the title is Beyond Economics, Visible and Visual Significance of Currency Design. And the aim of my investigation is to analyze the paradox of the visible and the visual in currency design, because here I can see two implications. First of all, such an investigation helps to reveal the complexity of money as a medium of socio-cultural communication, and especially it could be interestingly revealed as a process of money dematerialization. So once we see that in the course of money dematerialization, they lose the visibility, we can see more interesting implications concerning the cultural significance of money. And the second thing which is of importance here is that this way we can see that money has not only economic but also ideological significance. And I will we can figure it out within such a conceptualization of money. So if we address to Georg Simmel and his work Philosophy of Money, we can see that money could be understood in two aspects. First of all, money is abstract idea, and it means that money is a mechanism of economic relations. And secondly, money can be understood as a material form, meaning that it signifies the idea of money, and this way, in the material form, we can perceive money as an idea, because embodied in certain substance or designed in a specific way as a currency, it gains certain symbolic features, and in the course of dematerialization, money become more and more symbolic, and it means that throughout the development of economic relations, the relations which are rooted in economic sphere become more and more implicated, and social relations become more and more intellectual. So having this in mind, we can understand and conceptualize the currency design in this twofold understanding as well. So first of all, currency design could be understood as visible or as material form, and secondly, it could be understood as visual or representational. So this means that if we speak about currency design and money as a visible, we can understand it as its material form shaped in certain substance. And when we speak about currency design or about money as visual, we we refer to those narratives which are implied in currency design. So these are those visual representations which we can see on various coins, banknotes, and possibly implied in the logos of cryptocurrencies. So when we speak about visible aspect of currency design, first of all, we can see that material form is intended to embody the idea of money in substance so that it could be possible to perceive the reality in which certain types of economic value and economic relations exist. And this is why it is important to introduce metric systems and other specifically material signifiers which are related to material reality and which help us to perceive the idea of economic relations. This is why we need at the very beginning of money development, metal money of certain weight and of certain form, of certain shape. And secondly, the more developed the society becomes, the more symbolic features currency design gains, which means that at each stage of money development, the way people use and understand it becomes more intellectual. So this is why in the course of money dematerialization, we have various forms of money, and once invented as coins, as metal coins, later money become paper, made of paper, and today we have electronic money, which are highly abstract, and it means that our social practices related to our using of such forms of money, which have no form at all, become more and more intellectual. This is super intellectual if comparing to ancient coins, for example. And here you can see those illustrative examples. So first of all, we have coins, and they are shaped as certain circular metal. I'm sorry. Can you hear me well at the moment?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I just got a notification that I have an unstable internet connection, so I just wanted to make sure that everything is okay. Thank you. So speaking about illustrative examples, we can see that beginning with ancient times, people invented coins, and coins are most widespread among all monetary mediums, and it was used for the longest period in people's history, in human history. And later we have those paper money, which were invented as surrogate money in 15th century, and later they began they became more popular in the 18th century. And first of all, paper money were considered as credit money. Later they became fiat money, which means that they have no groundings in other metric systems. And at our age, we have cryptocurrencies and various applications for non-contact electronic payments. And once money as a material form is developing, it gains less and less visibility and visuality. And moving forward, I'm sorry, jumping to the visual aspect, we can here note that once we speak about those representations, it means that we speak not about economic value of money, which is implied in material forms, but also we refer to something non-economic. So once we analyze visual aspect of money, we understand that non-economic value is beyond material form, and it is usually highlighted as national or commemorative symbols, which are important for national history memory and constituting immaterial values like liberty, independence, civic duty, and other important immaterial values, which are motions of state image and state ideology. And secondly, it is important to note that representations which are used in currency design could be also signifiers of the power of authorities that issue certain currencies. And once currency design is developed throughout the years, those representations become more and more culturally determined, but still they have ideological implications as well, although these implications are obscured once we move forward and once our socio-cultural relations get more intellectual and get more developed. To illustrate the first notion, which means that we speak about non-economic value beyond material form, I can propose an example of this office building in Kaunas. And this is the office center, and its facade is designed as a stained glass panel, which is designed like a banknote, not paper money, but banknote of Lithuanian liras issued in 1924. And this example is especially important in the situation when Lithuania is using litas no more, but uses euros instead of liras. And secondly, it is important that we have such a building in the digitalized era when our social relations get more and more digitalized and they become more virtual and they have almost no groundings in material reality. But such an example shows that going beyond economics, it is important to see national currency as a historical symbol, which is saved in this urban reality and material reality. So this is the example of the first notion concerning non-economic value related to immaterial values and state values. And having an example for the second notion concerning obscured ideological implications, we can see, for example, these banknotes of 100 krona, of Norwegian krones, and here you can see that there are no portraits, there are no evident traces of power, but still we have these images of Viking ship, and we have the here we can see this abstract composition resembling the ship, and still in these images we can see not only cultural relations to Norwegian history and to the idea of relations to sea as a core driver of Norwegian history, but still we can understand that anyway these examples, once they have historical implications, they have ideological implications as well. So this is not an arbitrary image. This is the image which was thought out and which has a certain power of visualizing Norwegian history and state values. And as to the conclusions, we can see that while the visible material form of money is intended to help perceive the idea of money circulating in a material world, the visual representations of currency design promote idealized images of reality, substituting the material reality itself. So here we can see that visible and visual in currency design are in paradox to each other, because they both are related to material reality, but still they have different action, they have different influence on material reality. And another point which should be covered here as well is that once money becomes completely invisible, losing both its material form and visual content, the ways money might control its users in the digital era are more and more elusive unless the Institute of Money stops to exist. Because here we can see that there are new areas of manipulation, new areas of control, but they all are still to be investigated in detail. And I think that visible implications here are still of relevance, because although many things are unseen, still they have their power. Thank you so much for your attention, and here you can see my email in case you would like to further communicate with me concerning this investigation, and I am open to questions and remarks. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Ksenia, for your brilliant presentation. And let's ask to the participants if somebody has some questions or consideration, curiosity. Let's see in the chat too if you see something. I have Ksenia waiting for other inspiration. I have curiosity, maybe it's not a question, but I would like your opinion and maybe know if you study something like this. The relation between this aspect of money, especially the symbolized one, is a relevant point in art system. For example, I saw a few years ago an artist cutting million of dollars, he says, in very small pieces, and the piece of art was exactly this ball, this plexiglass material ball full of cutted money. Or, for example, another one I just saw 2 days ago in Turin Artissima fair art of Soliman Lopez. AI, so an artificial intelligence in cooperation, of course, with the programmation of the artist, who sell 25 pieces of this beautiful screen that was calculating on time the transitional operation of Bitcoin in putting, creating like DNA with the formulation, putting in oil viscosity, and this generate the piece of art. So just to know in your ideas, opinion, if you have, for example, have some case studies of this kind. Thank you, Ksenia.
Thank you so much for an interesting question, and I need to say here that money and art are a vast area for investigation, and as to my own understanding of this, I can say that first of all, it's interesting which ways money can be used as a material form, but as a part of art objects. And I think that this is a result of losing economic value as well. I will turn off my video in order to save my internet connection. So I think that once we use money as a material form more and more in art objects, it signifies that money loses its economic value, and it means that money as a material form is assigned to a new area of values and new area of its functionality. So we can see those new aspects of money functionality, which is no money at all. So it becomes no money. And another interesting point here, I think, is that a very popular at the moment is NFT, non-fungible tokens, where you can sell your digital artworks. And it's interesting how NFT is grounding their values in material reality anyway, because non-fungible tokens are highly arbitrary. So this is the most conventional token in the world, I think. But still, to support its value, to support its I'd even say to support its idea and its relevance to the field of art. It needs to imply in the field of art. So it needs the field of art in order to signify that NFT is valuable. And if we consider those examples of digital art by Beeple, for example, which was sold by through the Christie's auction house, we can see that people are interested in it and they are ready to spend the money on these kinds of art, and they see those relations between digital art as something non-material and value rooted in the material world. So I think that this is an area which certainly should be investigated further, because we have only two very brief brochures here, which were published in 2021. So they were published this year, and I think that we are anticipating more and more investigations here, which would be very interesting. So yeah.
Yes, thank you very much. And we have from the chat that say, Rafael, just out of curiosity, and please feel free to ignore the question. No, of course not. So the question of Rafael is, did you come across any studies pertinent to the defacing of money?
Defacing of money, I think that I need a clarification here. What is meant by defacing? Because I think there are some.
Rafael, if you can take the voice, I think then you follow in the speech, so you can switch on.
Yeah, yeah, that would be very helpful.
Of course. Thank you. By defacing, I mean the deliberate destruction or the deliberate alteration of the paper money, for example. It's rather common in here, so this is why I'm asking. When the
thank you so much, Rafael. I think that there were two main articles covering I think this field. The first one was by Josh Lauer, and it was investigating US dollars as a medium of mass communication. And the second one was by Jen Penrose, and it was concerning Scottish banks and issuing Scottish banknotes not through state banks, but through Scottish private banks. There were some ideas concerning making the relations between the state, banks, and communities of people in a more horizontal hierarchy, not a vertical one. And if you are interested in other investigations concerning somehow defacing money, I think maybe Bill Maurer's investigations might be of interest. I think I will put it on the chat because Bill Maurer. I think he could be considered as a critic of economic anthropology and money anthropology, but still I think he produces his own investigations in this field anyway. So if you are interested, I think you can look into those authors, and I will type others as well. I think these are on open access, but in case you might be further interested in this topic, I will be happy to proceed with the communication and share more sources with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other question? Otherwise, we can give the floor to Rafael Zanlorenzi. If you allowed me to read a few words about your position, you're professor of epistemology, political philosophy and theories of justice at Positivo University. He studied in Federal University of Paraná And at the present, he develops his research specialty in the field of legal semiotics, studying the impact of semiotic instruments on the analysis of judicial decision, notably in the domain of constitutional courts activity along their with their political and ethical ties. So we have a very heterogeneous panel, and we are open, of course, to this diversity. Thank you, Ksenia, and welcome, Rafael.
Thank you. Let me just try to share the screen here. Okay. Perfect. Can you guys see it? Yes?
Yes.
Perfect. So I'm gonna try to go straight to the point. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for the opportunity and for the lovely presentations so far. So I'd like to try and polarize a little bit of my strength here, trying to translate exactly what I'm trying to research. We have in this research we have actually tried to divide our efforts in two different ways, two distinct ways. One of them actually explores the philosophical basis for what a jurisdictional decision means and how it is built around certain representations. The other one will explore in a more specific way what we have grown accustomed to call the provisional arrest trials here in Brazil. The basis for this problem is that it's actually something that runs through the veins, so to speak, of any Supreme Court, in fact. Every Supreme Court, if we return to Tocqueville, for example, we will be brought to understand that every Supreme Court has, in a sense, a certain political dimension, and the representations that it places while building around decisions, they actually have a severe impact in any country, in any country's political conduct. So the problem that we are trying to face here is the aggravation of this scenario in the last few years here in Brazil, and it's not only here, in fact, but this is our exemplary case in a sense. So we have basically two big blocks of trials, one in 2016 and one in 2019, and these two big blocks, they go as far as to influence the fate of a former president of ours. So in order to understand how these representations are built, we actually returned to the idea and the conception of ethics and the philosophical basis for any informed decision within the framework of our Supreme Court, of any Supreme Court in a sense. So basically our objective is to try and understand how these representations are built around certain philosophies and how these philosophies can be brought inside certain structural decisions, and how these decisions can be viewed by the population and by the whole institutional body of a certain country. Therefore, I'm going to try to start with a few remarks on the philosophy that bases that emerges as the framework of these decisions. In order to do that, we have separated we have set two great examples, two philosophers that tend to help us in trying to frame our body of decisions. The first one is Aristotle, the most traditional one. And in fact, when we speak of Aristotle's decisions, let me just, I'm gonna I'm gonna go over some of the slides because of the amount of information. But as we explore Aristotelian perceptions of ethics, we are brought to understand that there are certain impulses that build certain representations within this philosophy. The basis for our ethics discussion is, in fact, the realization that ethics is deeply rooted in the conception of representations and in the construction of signs, of certain signs that become referential elements to indecision. We base our observations in the later remarks by Quintilian that actually accuses philosophers of robbing, in a sense, the ethical theme from rhetorics, transplanting it inside the philosophical discourse with a certain degree of success, in a sense. The fact is that we still remain within a certain field, within a certain framework of representations. And as Aristotle builds around this idea in his numerous writings about ethics, but namely in his Nicomachean Ethics, Aristotle actually attempts to understand the balance that can be struck between vice and virtue, obviously. But at the same time, he shows a great control and a remarkable clarity as far as cognition goes, and as far as cognition influences the gradual operation of virtue. In a sense, he understands that metaphysical thinking must be intertwined with the practical thinking, and both must work in consonance, in a sense, in order to perform the acquisition of certain virtues, the refinement of certain virtues, if you will. In a sense, that also means that we kind of need, and that difficulty is actually represented in philosophical language. We kind of need we kind of need to conceive certain representations, certain figurative elements in language that will allow us to anchor this metaphysical intention or this metaphysical reflection into our reality, and that will allow us eventually to translate these expectations into our daily lives. So when Aristotle opens this debate, it seems that it's deeply rooted in his own education and in Greek education in general, since it does not relinquish the idea of an arete, of a certain virtuous model that will encompass all sorts of virtues as elements that compose the ideal image of certain social roles or certain ontological expressions of the individual. I would serve myself, for example, of the idea and the figure of Hector in the Iliad. His the many aspects that characterize the image of Hector within the book, within the work. They actually make us understand what it is to be, or how one might go about trying to be the perfect husband, the perfect father, the perfect heir to a throne. It actually allows us to understand how virtues fit in the social role. This is an important element for us, because as our history, as the history of legal thinking evolves, these elements are just they are just displaced and misplaced, in a sense. They move around, and at some point we actually do not know anymore how to fit these representations as far as our decisions and our trials go. At first, we are trying to compare, in a sense, in any given trial, we're trying to compare, in a sense, the actions of an accused individual with those actions that should be perfected in direction of this arete. In a sense, as we settle and move towards new models of judgment, namely as modernity settles down and presents to us a certain procedural manner of seeing trials, this element kind of shifts around and is detached from the accused, and it's basically thrown upon the shoulders of the adjudicator or the accuser, in a sense. We'll return to that in a moment, just so we can frame philosophically frame our discussion. We should first understand that the search for these representations is in a constant duel with the idea of an open horizon of significance, an open horizon of language, in a sense. as we try to build this arete, this figuration, this mental image of the virtues, we are also trying to canalize our strength, to polarize our strength and our imaginary capabilities in order to stave off the richness, the phenomenal richness that surrounds us. Nevertheless, the uncertainty of these possibilities remain. We can never get rid completely of the uncertainty and the possibility of this novelty. This is our biggest advantage and disadvantage at the same time. In fact, a virtue can only be considered so when it enters our material, the set of our material relations, and by our exhausted testing and our continued attempts to become what these virtues somehow resume towards us or launch towards us, we can basically become virtues in a sense. So that means basically that we are constantly marching towards uncertainty in order to test these virtues. For example, if we want to understand, if we want to see if someone is actually courageous, we cannot basically just assume that courage is built or is cultivated in an inner reflection. Of course, this is necessary so we can understand what courage is, and we can understand hypothetically how to act in certain situations. Nevertheless, it's just when the situations actually become concrete, like when we actually have to face that which might cause us fear, that courage actually becomes concrete and actually becomes an attribute of the person that is acting. So in a sense, this communication is actually at odds with itself, in a sense. Medieval thinking actually brings up an attempt or a certain attempt to solve the problem through Aquinas' philosophy. And in a sense, it presents a pretty interesting solution. Basically, we center ourselves around the idea of the Lectio Divina as a state of meditation that allows for a certain communication of aspects that can be brought inside language, but at the same time, pardon me, at the same time can be matched with a pre-existing language, meaning the language of the scriptures. This inner meditation actually allows us to tailor virtues in a sense, but at the same time, it allows this virtue to be somehow emergent in our world. So there's a certain refinement of the many aspects that Aristotle has placed, namely because the idea and the shock between movement and potency and this latent energy that belongs to any object that might be transformed, in this case, ourselves and our souls, through the application of certain dynamics of virtue. Aquinas actually solves this problem by understanding that there is a way in which we can implosively determine the movement that we need in order to make ourselves virtuous. He actually splits the soul in a certain cartography. So the idea that the external movement must always influence an object that's beyond its own reach, and maybe that flirts with the idea of reach as it becomes part of its sphere of influence. It is actually a game between certain regions of the soul, one that passively will be attacked by this movement, and the one that actually moves, and the one that actually places the movement in order to be transformative. These elements are nevertheless lost after Chahon and after after we settle on in political philosophy the ideas of contractualism. And I'm not gonna take too long speaking of it because of our aim, our main goal. But basically, when modernity settles down, gradually we transform this classical archaic notion into a deontic model. The deontic model tries to facilitate this process by taking it and making it external to the individual. Law, in this sense, is reproduced by authors such as Domau or Pufendorf as being an element of affection that allows us to build certain communities and allows us a certain exchange, a certain communitary exchange that is somehow balanced. The problem with this is that by the time that this deontic mentality settles down, we also no longer have control over the meditational states that we need to encompass in order to become virtuous. It is somehow expected, while the state actually places down the law, that we absorb the law as a little token of meditation, as that we interiorize the contents of law in a sense, and become obedient because we are convinced that the contents of the law are the best way to act in this community. This never happens. Basically, this never happens. In fact, it's way easier for us to understand through the notion of a legal thought history, or the history of legal thought, that we're inclined to obey because we're afraid, and that we are inclined to obey because we fear that sanction that comes with the law. This, in fact, allows us to understand how, in a sense, the history of legal thinking has been concocted, has been built, and how it, in a sense, absorbed these concerns. We have, if we return to Hart, more specifically to Herbert Hart, more specifically, we will uncover the idea that we have, in fact, two structural movements within the history of legal thinking that represent, in a sense, this main concern, this main ethical concern. One of these movements is the one we've grown used to call the imperativist movement, or the imperativist set of theories. Imperativism, in a sense, determines that we obey the law because we are somehow afraid, or because the linguistic disposition demands so. On the other hand, we have legal skepticism as a force of balance, and legal skepticism is very brutal as far as the legal sciences go, because it actually destroys the base for any legal science. It turns law, it turns the juridical sciences into mere political practices. This is the basis for our problem, in fact. Skepticism determines that, first, law is merely conventional. Second, no judge can actually make decisions because a judge is never actually informed enough to make a proper decision. So if imperativism determines that the commands given by law are the final solutions to every problem, on the other hand, skepticism says that there is no solution, and that we are basically just juggling around certain representations and convincing ourselves that they are efficient. So these two bases actually became the center of our main debate, so to speak. If we focus now on the provisional arrest trials more specifically, we will begin to understand that these trials were basically crossed by political representations, and they lost a lot as far as our legal technique goes. The provisional trials, in a more specific sense, let me just perfect. The provisional arrest trials, they become the main example to us, because as they move and they change around. Let me just, I think it's too small, right? Let me just increase a little bit. Okay. They become the quintessential example of these dynamics, because within these two cycles, we actually see that many of the ministers, the judges of the Supreme Court, of our Supreme Court, they change their minds about the decisions they are about to make. And that is because they suffer with political pressure, or maybe they turn certain arguments as they become concerned about the future of the court itself. So the first part is actually happens in 2016 because of the appreciation of an habeas corpus from this man named Marco Rodrigues Dantas. He was judged and convicted during his trial in São Paulo's state court, and the state court actually determined that he should be arrested. That nevertheless goes specifically against certain dispositions, certain legal dispositions, namely Article 5, number 57 of Brazil's federal constitution, which states that no one will be found guilty until the final and unappealable criminal sentence. That would happen only after the Supreme Court would place a certain judgment upon the habeas corpus. So Dantas also supported this request on another article, the article 283 of the penal procedure of our penal procedure code, which states that no one will be arrested except in flagrant offense or by written and reasoned order of the competent judicial authority as a result of provisional arrest or by virtue of a criminal conviction passed in res judicata, meaning basically that the man should not be arrested unless the Supreme Court actually considered his possibilities of appeal exhausted. So this principle has been a staple of our legal structure, of our legal order since '88, when the Constitution was actually established. What happens is that during this trial, the condemnation, the conviction of this guy happens because the Supreme Court actually understands that this would represent a certain respect as far as the decisions of state courts and single judges would go. They actually tried to communicate, they tried to signal to local courts and to single judges that they trusted the decisions, that they trusted the fact that they might be offering a certain constitutional control that was effective in a sense. This nevertheless this decision was actually fought by certain of the ministers, namely Marco Aurelio. He actually understands that this collective decision begins the decadence of our Supreme Court, because under his perceptions, this represented the lack of certain defensive capabilities for constitutional rights. And I must say, I completely agree with him in that one. It actually suspends the main role, the main function of the Supreme Court in this. So by now, what we have here is a certain crisis within this representational aspect of the Supreme Court, because it no longer protects the citizens. It cannot be considered reliable. It cannot be considered like a proper court, a proper constitutional court. Nevertheless, it actually maintains a certain punitive mentality or punitivistic mentality, and that is actually well received in certain political spheres, because after all, it means that we actually want to punish these people after they receive two consecutive convictions. So this representation here becomes faltered. It actually, the whole representational chain falters in here. Nevertheless, we have by 2019 a new round of these trials, and now we are our implications are deeper, because in a certain way, the fate of Lula da Silva is our former president is at stake because of this trial. If the trial confirms the 2016 decision, it means that the former president will remain, will basically that he might remain in prison. If the decision is reversed, it means that he has an opening to appeal for his own freedom. What happens here is that two of the ministers that were still in the Supreme Court changed their judgment. And by changing the judgment, they actually subvert the entire order that had been established before. Now, the problem with this is that even though certain representations are reestablished, the message that is sent is very confusing, because by the time they actually review this decision, they break the history of this court. If we go to Dworkin's notorious theory of the conception of a chain romance as far as decisions go, meaning that a certain court has a history of its decisions and it has to keep a certain harmony within the boundaries of these decisions. Now we have this history broken. It's actually suspended. And now the court is actually being attacked because it is understood that the court can no longer sustain the idea or the intentions of our notions of certain legal security, of certain legal certainty. And then, now I would drive our observations to a conclusion. Basically, trying to show how this actually encompasses the crisis that we're living right now. The fact is that this decision, by the breakout of this decision, we basically spur a certain movement that ends up transforming political life in Brazil. In fact, we have our current president ascends to power based on these decisions, based on the idea. He actually consolidates his power in a sense, based on these decisions and based on the movement that happens around our former president. The idea of impunity becomes a representation that is established. And now we have a Supreme Court that is entirely under attack because of this. Several popular representations actually misplace the Supreme Court as a defender of rights. In fact, the crisis is so deep that the constitutional text, in the sense that it actually protects certain rights, is being questioned in its contents. Right now, we have at least two projects of law that are trying to reform the constitutional text in order to touch Article 5 and eliminate its protective contents in order to be able to reach out for what it is said a group of people that actually escaped the justice system with impunity. So you can see how this spurs out and how this crisis actually grows because of these decisions in this representative conflict, in a sense. Gradually, the Supreme Court has been trying to reestablish itself and reestablish its own public image, but it has been to no avail because of the political situation in our country. So, in fact, this actually became a larger, a more aggravated institutional crisis, and basically this is how we position these representations and how the discourse of virtue ends up becoming the centerpiece of this huge political crisis, in a sense. Yeah, I guess that's it. That's I guess I even talk too much, but anyway, that's the main idea of this research here, and we're still in development. So I guess that's it. Thank you so much, and if anyone has any questions or observations, I'd love to hear. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Rafael. We give the possibility to the participant to make some consideration or questions. Anyone? It's a big issue. You illuminate us with this deep speech, maybe a little bit far away from other corpus, other analysis of us. I was just interested in this way how the law, but I'm really far away from this issue, is leading, yes, of course, with the epistemology of person, of subjectivity, but even in some of construction, semiotic construction, even to the ontology almost. And I was thinking about all this new urgence of jurisdiction, of maybe transnational jurisdiction, about the safeguard of person, of collectivity, in terms of specificity, in terms of relation with, for example, surveillance. So this kind of area of jurisdiction. Maybe if you have some consideration about it, about it from your point of view, Rafael.
So if I understand correctly, the issue is basically your main concern is about the protection of individual rights pertaining to the idea of surveillance. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay. Yeah. So there's plenty, even within this very same issue and the very same position of our Supreme Court in a sense. This is I'd say a larger problem in a sense, because surveillance mechanisms, they have been largely utilized by jurists in a sense. They have been largely placed in a position that they represent a certain degree of security and a certain degree of a certain consolidation of probatory production. Our probatory corpus, in a sense, can benefit itself from surveillance technologies, from surveillance practices, and so on. Yeah, this is a big issue, because within our political dynamics, for example, we have had several problems with this recently. For example, how should I put this? Our presidency has attempted to merge certain packages of big data, so to speak, in order to allow our police body to have free access to this information, in order to have access to our National Transit Department information, for example, in order to increase aspects of vigilance. The excuse that they used, maybe my speech betrays me, but I'm completely against these sorts of measures anyway. The excuse that was employed is that we needed this merging because of the census, because we couldn't actually go on with a proper census practice because of the pandemics. And in this particular case, the Supreme Court actually managed to stave off the efforts of the presidency, basically under the allegation that by allowing this merging of information, we would actually attack certain rights of the citizens. It was not, basically it breaks all sorts of principles that we have. And I believe you guys know it a lot better, because we are actually employing the models that you are employing as far as surveillance and technology goes in here now, our own legislation. And they actually understood that this would be would cause major damage as far as our rights for the reserve of information preservation, informational preservation, and informational identity would go. And yeah, so basically, the Supreme Court, this is precisely the axis of the problem, because the Supreme Court actually has all these prerogatives derived from our constitutional text, or from any constitutional text in any case and in any Supreme Court. And sometimes Supreme Courts, because of political pressure, won't use them, won't employ these devices. But the fact is that every single time you refuse to employ these devices, they lose relevance, they become broken. And representational speech about the court and about the law actually rules out the future applications. So we're, in a sense, I think we're seeing, I'm not gonna extend myself even further, but just to place this idea, in a sense, we are seeing, maybe I'm going too far, but we're seeing the transitional between civilizational models here. We are actually abandoning gradually the idea of individuality. And we're embracing this notion that we must live for community, and that communitary life actually demands that we have some transparency in terms of information. And this is a very risky element. I mean, anyway.
Thank you very much, Rafael, for your brilliant presentation and the last clarification. So we can follow with the last speech that is myself. So I will present me actually already starting the presentation. I will, thanks of course the organization of this meeting that allowed me to give the opportunity to being present in this beautiful town. Actually, the change of the program is exactly for this reason, and we prefer to be present today and not to stay online in yesterday program first plan. So the title of my presentation is Interior Phase and Retraction of the Senses, a Transcultural Semiotic Reading. So in this heterogeneity, of perception and culture, we do another step to this curious issue. Small introduction, then we follow a short paradigm of references, some questions, a corpus of practices and textuality, and not the conclusion, but the following in process. So starting from the contextualization, it says to participation of my post-PhD position in project called Facets, that means face aesthetic in e-technology society. So we study body and face and its representations as concentrated fields of synthesis, but also widespread branching, able to get behind the physical body by somehow touching, for example, the sound by hearing, or the substance of the object optically, or getting the smell through olfactory system. So across this farinal experience, about which also yesterday we spoke, the semiotized face means to read the sign of subjectivity already written, emotionally or physiognomically, and understanding the interrelational aspects where contact with otherness is the only way of face manifestation. Quoting Bargella Chiappini, said, we can say the face is not only constitute in interaction, but is also constitute of interaction. Face has a very big reference issue, and we speak a little bit about the paradigm of reference, seen in the screen, this beautiful part of the work of Ulay, artist called Ulay. Paradigm of reference, okay, semiotic of art. Art as alternative modeling system in terms of Lothmanian semiotic. Art creates a fundamentally new level of reality that increases the domain of freedom and includes, paraphrasing Lothman, a feeling of alienation. And semiotic of body, very big area, but just to say something, we had the honor to hear Jacques Fontany yesterday, and is one of my main references. For example, in a figure of the body, I speak about my flesh, me flesh, that is the matter, the live matter of the body, of the sensible. So the vibratory tension inside the body, in the flesh. We speak about the se as field, internal field, it's itself as internal field, as an interoceptive theater of the knowledge of the feeling, the interior self, and the self as the own body. That means the envelope, the haptic, and is the body connected to the exteroception. So to the exteroceptivity, to the universal sensorial of the self. Through this semiotic approach and some case study, we try to answer to like provocation questions, like it can be a face neutral or silent. We try to understand this idea of neutrality, of state of silence, if possible to grasp it. And these instances are related with the sensorial transition from the external stimulus to perception as modulation in co-creation with internal and instantaneous captation of phenomenon. Or, for example, other question, which are the relation between verbal language concept of silence and the synesthetic one, in both terms of perception and expression too, and how it could be visually represented. Or also connected to my last question before, this relation between human and no human silence. Is it still the switch off modality of machine that silence the agency of the machine in no agency, in silence as absence of exchanges between inner and outer words, and artificial neural net can learn as a human neural net to inactivate their hyperdynamic movement in order to be in silence or neutral or quiet in terms of stabilize in time? Provocative question. So a little more, some example of textuality. About neutrality, we quote some Levinas words and the way in which the other presents itself going behind the idea of the other in me. We call in effect this otherness phase. So this way does not consist in appearing as a theme under my gaze, in spreading itself out as a set of qualities forming an image. The face of other, it can be, you know, it brings a notion of truth that is not the unveiling of impersonal neutral, but an expression. Of course, in music, in some sound art, of course, we study silence as a manifestation. We have John Cage, wonderful example of this, and from there going on from 50. In theatrical studies, there is a specific current that has concentrated its work on search of silence and neutrality. The principal reference is Lecoq. He built a didactical system where the first step is the psychology of silent life. The intent is to build a white page. These are the initial steps that try to go to the infantilization, focusing in forgetting what we have already learned. The silence began before the word, and to learn it, Lecoq proposed this first step of big progressing in theater, fixed it in reinterpretation, improvising gesture, and sensational normal life, putting attention in the generation of the words. So what is before and after a generation of a word? And somehow is the same way how our thinking are working. What is after one and before one thinking, this is maybe this neutral field that Lecoq start to teach us, start to going on. So we are not psychologists, so we are trying to understand this manifestation of sign as semiotician behind or in connection with the psychodimension, so which is the semiodimension. Some manifestation here of what we are showing is so the embodiment of the silence still in this theatrical studies proposed by Lecoq is followed by the immersion into the neutral mask, a very connected issue to the silence itself. So the neutral mask is a spatial object is a state, maybe a semiotic state. There are still signs, there are still process of signification, even if there is this intent to neutrality. Is a phase that is called from Lecoq neutral in equilibrium, and that propose through masking, through exercise, a physical sensation of calm and of neutrality. This state of neutrality is a state of reception and manifestation without somehow interior conflict. So this reference is a reference to study the face as a mediator and interactive producer of sensation and of perception. So Lecoq say only when people, actors, students feel this state of neutrality through wearing this mask, so their body, their face are available, are in disposition to really open their other manifestation and write again upon their new face, their open up and like empty face. So there are still tension in a neutral face, in no action. These are a question. And in this diapositive, we see the artifact that inhibit the perception. For example, so there are artifacts, as we saw the mask, there are artifacts that try to inhibit, so to make like blocks between the perception from the body to outside world. Some experimentation here, like the isolator, or another interesting John Lilly machine construction that is still used in the actuality, where all this stream is getting more and more available. It wake up the curiosity of people interested in this sensory and perception absence of feeling. So these are like machine that deceive. So it's a sort of deceiving through barostatic sensories. So this barostatic sensory change the sensation of the body to be grazed by the gravity that we all know, that we are all under forces that that we voluntary or not, we perceive this force. So in this kind of experiment, this sensory of barostatic sensory change the perception. So there is a sort of what is called the deprivation, sensorial deprivation. This body and this feeling build like a block, a temporal sensory block to this inner and outsider work. So there are artifacts, as we see in the mask or in this machine, but there are of course many practices that come from, especially from different other fields, more psychological fields or more metaphysical maybe fields. For example, here we have practices called Shanmuki Mudra in the second part and the Chekari Mudra in the first part, that are practices that allow the person that practice it to to somehow to open this state of transition before the manifestation of sign of perception. That means, as Lecoq say about the silent, that is the word, the part of the part that is built before and after a word, for example. Okay, in this kind of practices, the silence is what is building before and after the manifestation of the perception. There are in a study we can also do reference to these old kind of studies, for example, from this beautiful etching done by Picard on the drawing by Lebrun. So this is a state of tranquility that the pseudoscience of physiognomy take place there. Physiognomy, recalling to Lavater, is the observation of character in the state of tranquility or rest. That is different to pathognomy. That is the study of character in action. So we had other slide, but I choose just this one. That is about tranquility, the state, like the neutral state, from where all the other sensation then can take place. So there are beautiful drawing about color, about all this emotional state. This is the study called pathognomy. So the pathognomy is the science that tries to study the manifestation in the human face through this sensation written in the face temporally. So in the state of pathos. But physiognomy in change is the study, pseudoscience study, that try to focus on the stabilized face, what is already sedimented there. Of course, physiognomy has been manipulated. There are very interesting study there, but they have been also manipulated to, for example, from Lombroso to study and to rationalize the topology of the face. There are many other examples that we can do. For example, I just choose a few art pieces for their form and also for their title, as we know, following this isomorphism. So, for example, the piece of Michael Boremans, these two on the sides, they are called double science. Many references can be done there. Or we have also the Shilpa Gupta piece called Sanzaru. Sanzaru, we know, is what we normally refer to these three monkeys, beautiful monkey with I don't teach, I don't hurt, I don't speak, I don't listen. A big history over there too. Some other pieces, just like following this idea to study silence, how is possible to study silence, how can we deep there, and of course it's just suggestion, and I will almost finish to give you also the voice to start to go deeper in this. This is a piece of Jeff Ariosol that he showed a posture, the idea of posture of silence. He said, I don't suggest to keep silence, but I did this piece to suggest to listen more in this Pompidou area of Paris. And of course, there are many idea of silence. The forced silence is not only the voluntary silence. So, for example, in this political argumentation for silence, we have the artist Pavlenskis that in 2012, to protest the case of Pousseriot, shows himself with his sound bounce. In this case, disabling oneself from speaking and physically sewing up one's lip was a gesture marked by critical motivation and marked political stance opposed to the dominant one. So, and immediately silence, this proposed by this art system, able to build and transmit an alternative to the domain position that accused this Pousseriot group. And it's no longer a question of seeking silence and encouraging it to that peaceful phase emerge, the result of internal peace, but rather a search for silence with the opposite meaning, and wanted to show one's opinion to whole world, to affirm one's metaphorical voice for collective and social cause. Is almost in a fakir position, this legendary like practitioner of Moni philosophy, that is silent. The figure are almost ascetic, also in this case of this artist. So finishing the one of the first question was also about this field that is quite new. So as we build artificial intelligence that is based on the comparison between neural organization of the human being, that somehow through these techniques can allow him herself to get and to understand, or maybe to provoke this silent state. So how this neural connection and more and more deep learning can allow themselves to learn silence. So this is still an enigma, and I thank you very much for your attention. Thank you. Okay, just few minutes to leave us the possibility to make maybe some question or just curiosity. Thank you. You want to come here, Kari?
This concept of Japanese culture, the meaningful silence, I don't know how much related is this, because this is a silence that doesn't want to express, just the vacuum. While in Japanese culture, it's a silence that is created in order to generate meaning. So I don't know if there's a relation there.
Of course, Carlos asked, sorry for the digital listener, about this Japanese idea of silence that is not intended to be manifest, but instead is an interior state. Yes, the research is going also over there. The idea to try to study this silent state actually come from not really Japanese, because I don't know exactly over there how it's going, but yeah, from Oriental philosophies and practices, but from semiotician students too, that is me again. What is possible there, which is the connection between the generation of senses through generation of sensing without this with meaning, the generation of meaning without a specific manifestation of them. So this is a little bit the direction when I try to study silence, that in the first part I compare, maybe wrongly, but trying to understand, compare with this state of tranquility, this states of neutrality, and how we can maybe build like a semiotician semiotic of that. So yes, of course, very, very close to this. Thank you, Carlos. Thank you.
Sorry, timely curiosity. Wondering if perhaps possibly expanded widespread wasn't there before.
Yes, who you say? Which person?
I've seen such things, but I couldn't.
Okay, you saw. Can you maybe repeat a little slowly? Sorry.
Yeah.
And the mask. Yes, thank you. Perfect. And then we finish with this beautiful.
Oh, sorry. I'm just curious if your research on silence has expanded to actually include.
Okay, but it's chirurgical mask, medical mask.
Just these things.
This, okay, in pandemic mask. Okay, thank you very much for your question. Question come from, okay, the relation between silence and the mask somehow. Of course, not of course, maybe not yet. I research a little bit in for the group which I'm part of, into mask. And of course, some other colleagues, they did more on chirurgical, on medical mask, and more on in pandemic moments. For example, I start to study this kind of mask before just 2 months before pandemic, in the end of 2019, for the manifestation in Hong Kong. Big manifestation where suddenly this mask was forbidden, but for other reasons, for the urgence of recognize who was manifesting. So it's a big use, and I think that is also related to another kind of silence that is more aesthetical. That means actually just seeing us, we are covering this. So for example, my colleague Viola, he studied, okay, how can we express and how can we understand the other people's speech with the mask. And actually this was like an example, and I asked our colleague to keep off, because this is covering, veiling. So this is the big use of the veil of our face, and of course reminded that one of the translation of persona is exactly mask. So the mask is big and wonderful huge use of working on more and more. Thank you. So thank you very much to the house, and thank you to us. We can close our session and go to lunch. Thank you. Bye.